You're listening to the Art Said podcast, episode number 9, a conversation with Brian Hardgroove. Welcome to the Art Said podcast, conversations through the perspective of the arts and education, hosted by educators and artists Shauna Longo and Edric DeBose.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking to a musician, producer, performer, a multi-instrumentalist, Brian Hardgroove. He is probably most well known as a bass player for the band Public Enemy, headed by Chuck D, musical director for that live band. He has done production work with a wide variety of artists, including internationally known reggae artist Burning Spear. You did production on a couple of tracks, I think, on an album that won a Grammy. So we're talking to the Grammy award-winning artist. You won't say that, but I will because I know you're very humble. But Grammy award-winning, producer Brian Hardgroove. You've worked with Bootsy Collins, with Fred Wesley, the James Brown Band, who also have their own careers and well-known recordings as a performer and a producer for them. People like Fred Schneider of the B-52s, Stuart Copeland of a band you might know, people might have heard of, called The Police, right? Doug Pinnick of King's X. And one of my favorite things, you've produced a couple of punk rock bands in China, right? So we're talking about somebody who has a wide variety of experiences, and also you're a radio show host. You had a radio show where you were in Santa Fe, where you were interviewing a wide variety of different musical artists, but also people in the arts who have different kinds of public interfaces, different mediums. You've also produced video. So you've done a wide variety of things. And then for the purposes of this conversation, you worked at, I think, for 2.5 years with the University of New Mexico at Santa Fe, the Santa Fe College of Art and Design, in the music department as an artist in residence. And you were teaching recording and production techniques, offering insights into the music business, rights and royalties and all that kind of stuff, all the real things you need to know to get this done. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to be here.
Well, thank you. I mean, you and I go back a long way. So
yeah, we do.
You call, I'm there. So
okay.
It's all good. Yeah.
And I truly appreciate you being here with us tonight. Just getting your perspective on the arts and education and through your career. I think our listeners are really gonna connect with it, and I'm excited to hear it.
Cool. I look forward to it.
Good. So I just want to quickly outline some of what we're going to talk about. We'll go step by step, but just want to give everybody an idea. We're going to start with I like to know what some of your early experiences were with music, and when music started to become something real for you, and this idea that a musician was something you could be, right? When that became real, and then through those experiences, how you understood music connected to the world or to your community, or to other people, to friends, to your family, just what impact that started to have. And then to talk briefly about who your teachers were, right? What were the kinds of things you learned from your teachers, and then what were the kind of things you learned from performing music that applied to real life, what those lessons were. And then when I finish with talking about your experience in teaching, what do you believe are some of the important things to share with students? If somebody wants a career in the arts, what are the kinds of things they need to know and understand about the craft?
Right.
So I'm sorry. So I mean, just like I said, I really. When did music start to hit? I mean, when did you start to feel it?
Well, this is a story that will be familiar to you, probably, Edric, because I'm sure I've shared this with you years ago. I wanted to be a police officer when I was a kid.
Right.
And so at 14 years old, I won tickets from my radio station, WWRL in New York. I won tickets to see Earth, Wind, and Fire. And that was 1974. And it was their first national arena tour when they were just getting big enough to play in arenas in America. And so I won tickets to see them over the summer. And I went to the concert with a friend of mine. And I was bussed into, as a student, I was bussed into white neighborhoods outside of my Black community.
Okay, right.
And so those experiences were beneficial to some degree, but traumatic in a lot of ways.
Yes.
So the concert was even further east into quote unquote hostile territory. It was at Nassau Coliseum.
Okay, right.
So I went to the show, and knowing I'm in that part of town, were inside the arena where none of that was an issue. There were black people, white people, Asian people, just vibing on this powerful, positive, enjoyable music by Earth, Wind, and Fire. And I had, if an epiphany is a real thing you can have, I had it that day.
Sure.
And when I saw this, when I heard this powerful music, saw this incredible imagery, and this just massive amounts of giving, and then I'm surrounded by these people who, because I had, since it was tickets, there were tickets from the radio station. I had really great seats, and so I'm surrounded and looking at all these people who would, outside of this arena, would have been people I'd be suspicious of,
right,
and afraid of in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
But they were all vibing on this music, as well as black people who were there vibing on it. So as time unfolded, I realized, wow, that's something I can do. That's something I want to do. That's something I should do. So it was that concert specifically that made me realize music as a profession was a way to go. And because I was able to recognize over the course of the weeks, these things unfold as you think about them. I realized, well, if I was going to be a policeman, I would be dealing with people after they've been victimized, or I'd be dealing with somebody after they victimized someone else.
Right.
But Earth, Wind, and Fire's music was putting everybody around me on a positive course. And I realized that's a better weapon than a gun for me. Right. So that was clearly the moment I chose music as a life course.
And then how did that start to develop? So then after that, you have this experience. Where do you buy a guitar? There's a piano available?
There was a piano in the house. But I gravitated towards the bass guitar because around the same time, my brother had an interest in bass. But his interest was a passing one. Mm-hmm. And being it was my older brother, I wanted to pattern myself after him. And now, granted, we had a whole bunch of music that we were exposed to as children. Tito Puente was a friend of my family, friend of my mother and dad. Sam Cooke was a personal friend of my mother and father.
Wow.
Donald Height, I think the singer's name was. Jackie Wilson. They were all friends of my parents. But,
wow.
But there was never conversation or the thought about going into that. But all that gunpowder gets put in you, and then Earth, Wind, and Fire ignited it. You know what I mean? So after the concert, some months went by, and like I said, these feelings had to, galvanize into a real idea of going in this direction. And I asked my mother for a bass guitar, and she, being a pianist herself, she was wise enough to say, well, look, if you learn how to play guitar first, then we'll buy you a bass guitar, because she realized the bass could be fairly limited. As she understood its function in a modern music situation. So there was a 9-week course, summer course, and it's for your listeners who are from Queens. It was at Benjamin Cardozo High School, which was the deadly enemy of my high school, Martin Van Buren High School. But I had to, and this is all before I went to high school, so I had to go to a 9-week course at Cardozo and do a recital. I did it, successfully passed the recital, and then my father specifically took me to Sam Ash in Long Island. It's all on Long Island. Took me to Sam Ash in Hempstead, not far from the arena where Earth, Wind, and Fire played. Wow. And asked me to look at basses and see what I wanted. I never forget, Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali had just fought or had a fight coming up. The weigh-ins were a big deal at that time. Joe Frazier weighed in at 221 pounds. His Fender Precision bass was $221. But there was another company which you might remember, called Carlo Robelli, and they were a knockoff company, like Ibanez was in the beginning. And my
Right.
father said, "Well, this one is the exact same instrument as that because they were
Yes.
making quality copies." And so my father bought that one for me, and it was an excellent instrument. I played it for years. So I got my bass, and then I started on my journey.
Okay.
Do you still have that bass?
Oh gosh, you want to bring tears to my eyes? No, I
I'm
don't.
sorry.
That's one of my biggest regrets.
Yeah.
And I have so many instruments I don't have anymore. I really regret now.
So you start learning the instrument. When do you start to understand where music and performing fits into your life in terms of the world? What is it you're starting to feel like you can do, given your experiences and where you're performing, where you're listening, the experiences you had? How do you start to understand how you're going to negotiate, making a place for yourself?
Yeah, that in retrospect, that happened over time. It wasn't a conscious thing, and I'm guessing a lot of musicians went through it the same way,
Right.
Without somebody just like really on your back or really in front of you leading you. I just wanted to do it, so I was just doing everything that was available. I was just going to jam sessions and blah 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 blah. And but the opportunity to get actually in the game came when I was on 48th Street, where all the music stores were in Manhattan. And I was walking down the street with my girlfriend with my bass on my back, and a gentleman came up to me with this deep Australian accent. He had an album under his arm, and a 12-inch album and a 12-inch single. And his name is Stuart McFarlane. You should look him up. He's a well-known artist, instructor. He's an art instructor and an accomplished. Is painter the right word?
Yes.
I don't want to offend anybody. Stuart McFarlane. He's in Hobart, Tasmania. Hobart.
Okay.
So anyway, he was walking down the street. I mean, straight up hardcore bohemian cat. He was walking down the street, and he comes up to me, says, "Hey, is that a bass? Is that a bass you're carrying?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Would you like to play a show with me at CBGB's?" It was July something, 1980. It might have been July 4th. I have to look back on the cassette. And he said, "I have a gig. It was a couple of weeks away." He said, "Could here's the album and here's the single. Learn this stuff and come to rehearsal at wherever it was, and whenever that was." And that was my first professional gig. It was actually at CBGB's.
Wow, that's insane.
Talk about insane. If on a different call, I can tell you just how insane that was.
Oh, I'm sure.
But I'll keep it family friendly here. It was like that. Not me, but what I witnessed, what I saw.
Yes.
And so that's when the opportunity to get in the game came. And then I started meeting other musicians who were in bands I heard of, and then I started navigating it from there. There was no real clear plan unless something came to me, and I just went after that thing. But I was bouncing from one thing to the next, but they were always bouncing up a step.
Okay.
Something more prominent,
So I think the best way to ask this question then is what were the most powerful learning experiences from that? So you're out, you're performing, you're playing, but what is it you're learning? What is it you're picking up? What are the life lessons and what are the professional lessons that you're really realizing, oh, this is what I need to do. This is what I have to focus on.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because that's where my value in the university really came in, and the president really saw that. I learned about people.
Okay.
I learned about responsibility. I learned about professionalism. I learned how different people really are and how similar people really are. Okay. I learned both of those things. It's a wide range of how different people are and really slim line of just how similar people are.
Okay.
And especially given certain circumstances, at least in the construct of this country. At that time, I wasn't traveling much.
Okay.
In the construct of this country and New York City, which is where we were growing up and these first experiences were. So I learned about people and I learned about myself.
Okay.
you could know people very, very well, but if you don't know yourself, you can't function really well. You're
Right.
not going to get much done. So I mean, it's really a myriad of things, and honestly, too many important things for me to just pick one in the course of a conversation. I'd be able to say, "Oh yeah, so I remember when da da da," and then I can lay it out.
Right.
To pick one right now is a little bit difficult. As we talk more, maybe something will come up.
Okay.
But generally, I started to see myself,
Right.
and I started to hear what other people saw when they saw me. I
Right.
had, I had friends who would communicate with me. I learned communication,
Yes.
communicating.
Right.
Yeah.
So for me, when you say professionalism and responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
those two things I think are real life values that really you realize no matter what you're doing, you have to bring that to the game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nothing really happens with you. There's also an element I think of learning to trust yourself because I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a quality of professionalism and knowing what it is you're going to bring and how you're going to answer
Yeah.
to what the circumstance requires.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
so did you so when you're teaching, then when or because you're in a position of being a teacher, even if you're not formally teaching, if you're working with other musicians who are younger than you, you're still in a position of, in some ways of teacher instructing. So, but also formally, when you are teaching, what what do you understand is really important to impart to somebody who's learning and somebody who's taking this on as a sense of identity and what kinds of lessons do you think they have to what things do they have to really think about, what do you have to give to them to you need to really work on this, you have to think about this.
Yeah. I had never thought about that really. It poses the question that way, but when you say it, something becomes very clear to me. Those students that I dealt with,
Mm-hmm.
it was always important to me that they understood why I said anything I said.
Hmm.
Okay? If we're discussing something, understanding why I gave you an answer the particular way. Just knowing a fact is not enough when you're informing young mind, when you're educating young minds. A fact is a lot of people know facts, but they don't know why or how to apply these things. So I was hired because I had connections to the professional world. It
Right.
was at a time when the student debt issue had become a national conversation,
Right.
and art schools generally were under a boatload of pressure. Like, these kids are spending all this money. Can they get a job when they leave?
Right.
Why
Mm-hmm.
are we saddling these people with all this debt? That's exactly when the university came after me, because it was on the heels of me just having brought Public Enemy to play at the university, because it was
Okay.
just a couple of blocks from my house. So I
Right.
put on this big production with the university, and it was broadcast to a number of their sister schools
Right.
around the world simultaneously. They saw how I interacted with the students,
Mm-hmm.
pulled students from different departments to actually be in this band to open up for Public Enemy.
Okay.
And those kids kicked ASS.
You can say that.
And the guys from Public, I never forget Chuck.
Mm-hmm.
He came out while those kids were playing and said, "Yo, P, this group they're incredible. What are you going to be doing something with them later?" I said, "Nah, Chuck. I just knew that because I just stopped playing with the band for about a year at that point.
Okay.
I wasn't traveling with the band anymore. I said, but look, I've been playing with the band long enough. We've left a lot of dead bodies as opening acts. We killed a lot of people that opened up before us. So I knew what this had to be in order to work in front of Public Enemy,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
it did. And so the head of the photography department was a big hip hop fan,
Mm-hmm.
David Scheinbaum, and the president and vice president of the school. They came after me, and I mean aggressively.
Okay.
Like 2 weeks later, and said, "Would you consider an artist in residence position?" I said, "I don't have the sheepskin to teach."
Mm-hmm.
And they all said, "Yes, you do."
Okay.
I never forget the photography teacher said, I said it to him first. I said, I didn't go to school. I don't have the license to, I don't have the degree to teach. He said, I guarantee you, you've been teaching your whole life.
Mm.
And what it is you do have, no one else in this school has.
Okay.
You have a professional career, and you are a direct line of access to that world that no other instructor has. And Keith Jarrett's brother was
Okay.
one of the musicians in there, and he didn't have it like that.
Wow.
He was one of the instructors in there,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't have that kind of thing. So when it was put to me like that, I'm like, yeah, you're right. I always do express and share. So I have been teaching my whole life,
Right.
and I realized that years ago when our relationship developed, when
Okay.
with the conversations we had, because you pointed that out to me in various ways. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we're getting towards the end here. I believe I'm trying to figure out a way to kind of sort of sum this conversation up in some ways, and it's really about the significance, the meaning of arts and education, right? So,
Mhm.
so the university pursues you because they understand that you're able to give something which engages with the real world, right?
Mhm.
Um, and again, coming from that early experience of Earth, Wind, and Fire, and realizing how music has this power to transcend and bring people together. And I know you've talked for a long time about the importance of music doing that socially and having an impact in the world, right?
Mhm.
Or
Yeah.
even when at the last NAMM conference, that's what you were doing. You were presenting an award to Chuck D, and it was about impact in performances. Um, is it again? We need to wind up. So, is there something you want to say about what the value of the arts brings to young people, but also where that sits within the world?
Yeah. I will speak for music
Okay.
as a specific discipline in the world of art, because
Okay.
that's what I know the most about. Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to assume that it does apply in other areas. Music, learning music as a young person
Mm-hmm.
is it gives you a direct connection to your critical thinking skills.
Hmm.
Okay. Learning music, sharing music, it opens the mind. If it's music you're dealing with, if it's becoming famous and being an artist, the very thing I'm saying could pass a lot of people by.
Hmm.
Okay. but
Yep.
as but music as a discipline,
Right.
it is direct access to your critical thinking skills, and it can also work as a listener.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, especially if there are words
Okay.
on top of the music. But
Mm-hmm.
the part of the brain that you have to access to create music is problem solving. It's
Right.
problem solving and options. Figure, I got some options, and so if I do this one, then I'll save that for later. It's puzzling,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when humans do that. A lot. If more humans did that, I
Yes.
believe we have far less problems.
Right.
Okay. And then if you start interacting with other people through music, oh my goodness, you can actually recognize what peace could look like,
Yeah.
because
Yes.
someone you wouldn't normally engage is like saying something through music that's
Yes.
moving you to tears, move you to joy, move you to whatever. It's a powerful discipline. And that's why I've said the most powerful export that this country has is not its military, it's not its economic shenanigans, it's not its medical prowess. It is our culture.
Mm.
Good, bad, and indifferent, because there's good things about it and bad things about it. But
Yep.
American culture, given that it is what it is, however we got here, it is something that has a lot of potential. And music is actually at the arrowhead of American culture. It's the one discipline that's been able to go behind the Iron Curtain for decades
Yes.
before anything else can get back there.
That's true. Yep.
You
Absolutely.
It's that's why I do it. You know.
There it is.
Well, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your time with
Mhm.
us this evening, and your wisdom and your experience and imparting that on our listeners. And hopefully they enjoyed it as much as I did. Edric, what do
Mhm.
you have? What do you want to wrap us up with?
Oh, I learned some things.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
let's do it again. I'd love to do it again.
lovely. Cool.
Excellent. We will definitely have you back. That will be great.
Yeah.
Great.
And I'll see
Yeah.
you at NAM.
Yes,
Yes,
indeed.
I will definitely see you in NAM.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for all this, Brian. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye bye.